Welcome to Everyone Loves Guitar, where we get to sit down and talk with interesting professional guitar players and related music industry experts. If you love playing guitar, stick around. You're in the right place. Hey everybody, this is Craig Garber from Everyone Loves Guitar. I've got a really sharp, very cool studio and touring guitarist with us today. We're here with Mike Sievers. He's been a studio and touring guitarist who's been in Nashville since 1976. And outside of working in a music store for a couple of years, Mike's always been a professional musician. That is awesome, man. That's not something a lot of people can say. Congratulations.
Well, thank you.
When he first moved to Nashville, he toured briefly with Eddie Rabbitt. I've always loved Eddie Rabbitt, that name. It's just like a very cool name, Eddie Rabbitt.
It is.
Isn't it?
It's his real name. Yeah, that was it. Yeah.
And then he toured with Dolly Parton for 3 years. He's played on numerous Billboard 200 and U.S. Billboard Top Country album charting records. He's worked with notable session players like Lee Sklar, Brent Mason, Dave Pomeroy, Dan Dugmore, Paul Franklin, Glenn Worf, Jim Horn, Terry McMillan, Bruce Boughton, and Pat Sievers. On Don McLean's 2009 album, Addicted to Black, Mike not only played on the record, but he was also the producer, the engineer, as well as the drum and keyboard programmer. He's also worked and toured with some of the biggest names in music history, such as Dolly Parton, Rod Stewart, Alabama, Eric Church, Marty Balin, Olivia Newton-John, Paul Simon, Steve Winwood, Felix Cavallari, Tanya Tucker, Lynyrd Skynyrd, and Brian Wilson. Man, that's like a who's who of my childhood.
It's pretty cool to see it written down. It's like, whoa, really?
Yeah, a lot of guys say that. They're like, wow, I've kind of done a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thanks, man. I really appreciate you taking the time to come on the show, man. I really appreciate that.
Well, thank you. Been looking forward to it.
Anything exciting going on with you?
Yeah. It's pretty amazing. The phone keeps ringing. It's started. I just did the first. Well, it's really in the demo stage right now, but I just played on the first song for Rod Stewart's new album. I played on the last one, which was called Another Country, and came out in 2015. He's starting a new one, and they just sent me a song to play on that he and his producer, Kevin Savagar, are writing, and it's a very Otis Redding, Stax sounding kind of track, which I think is going to be really cool. But they asked me to kind of, play like Steve Cropper, which was like, oh, okay, because that's, Steve Cropper was like one of my very first huge influences. So,
sure.
So that I did that. That was last week, and so that is very exciting to be back on the radar there for that one. And I just accepted a Christmas tour, which starts in the middle of November with Jewel.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah, that's going to be fun. I think it's that runs through the last part of November and into December.
Where are you going? Where's you?
Oh, all over the country. It just starts out right after Thanksgiving in Las Vegas, and then we go up and down California, and then start working our way back east and back west. It just crosses the country.
That's great, man. Congratulations. That's awesome. You coming to Tampa any chance?
I don't know. I'll have to look on the schedule and see. I'll definitely. I'll let you know for sure.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic. Yeah. So I got to just tell you this quick story. It has nothing to do with music, but like it's been on my mind. So my wife's out of town in the UK visiting her family. So of course I get a chance to watch all the movies that I know she wouldn't watch.
Oh, I do that too. Yeah.
Have you ever seen Apocalypse Now?
I have. Yeah.
I watched it when it came out in '79, and I was only 16, and I couldn't process it. Mm-hmm. I watched most of it the last couple of nights, and then this morning before the call, I hopped on the stationary bike to do my cardio, and I watched the rest of it. What an amazing, intense... I was just blown away. I know that's totally not relevant to this, but I'm still feeling like when I walk my dog after that, I normally listen to stuff, podcasts, music. I couldn't even listen to stuff. I was just trying to decompress from that movie. It was so intense, man. I was just like, wow.
Yeah.
You don't... It's like when you hear a great piece of music and it's like, wow, and you just, that's how I felt with that movie. Anyway, totally unrelated. I just had to get that off my chest, though.
Yeah, it's a yeah. I think of all the Vietnam era films, that's my favorite.
It really was, because it got into the human condition and the psychology of the effects of the psychology of war. And I have a good buddy that he did like 5 tours of duty in Afghanistan, and he's got definitely post-traumatic stress, and he's told me some of the things, and I could see all that being very realistic, so
yeah.
Anyway, let's switch to good positive stuff. I want to just ask you, you've worked with so many like major iconic people. I was curious about a few of them, how you got the gig, and what was the biggest takeaway lesson you learned from some of these folks. Let's start with Rod Stewart, considering you're still working with him.
Oh, well, it's sort of different. My work with him is more like, like New Millennium Recording. I've never met him, so
okay. I totally get it. I totally get it. Yeah.
I'm friends with this producer, Kevin Cavallari, who I've worked for many years. I originally met him through an Austin singer-songwriter named Kimmy Rhodes, who's amazing. But she was working with Kevin, and that's how I met him. And so down through the years, he's just continued to keep sending me stuff to play on. He produces a lot of pop artists in Japan and Europe and everything. Very, very successful guy. But he sent me a song to play on, and there was just a scratch vocal on it, and so I played on it, and sent the files back to him, and it turned out to be a song for Rod. He emailed me a few days later and said, "Hey, Rod sang the song and it sounds great." I'm like, "Oh, okay, well."
Oh, you didn't even know it was for Rod at the time.
I didn't at the time. No.
Is that good is that good or bad? It probably was good.
Well, in that case, it was good. It was a song called "Can't We Stay Home Tonight." It was a very slow R&B kind of ballad. And, I think if I would have known, I would have, like referenced some of his older stuff, and it would have influenced what I played.
Yeah.
And so, but I just, I actually kind of ended up playing a lick on the intro, and it was kind of used throughout the song, but it was kind of reminiscent of, if you've heard Rod's version of "People Get Ready," where Jeff Beck plays this, lick that's
beautiful.
Kind of a thing.
Beautiful.
Yeah, it's not that lick, but it's kind of a thing like that. And the coolest thing for me is that, like, at the very end of the song, when the lick comes around again, he sings along with it.
Ah, that's great, man.
Yeah, I was listening to the record the first time with my wife Peggy, and it sort of got by me the first time. She said, "Do you realize he's singing that lick along with you?" And I'm like, "Oh, yeah, okay."
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was a nice moment there when I first heard that. But, yeah, so that's how I got that job. Just like so many things, it's just relationships, knowing people for years, and people develop trust, and they know you're going to work hard and do a good job. So yeah, that's how a lot of things happen.
How do you feel about the new, as you call it, the new millennium way of recording? I mean, you don't have a choice and you got to do it, but is there, like, I've talked to a lot of guys that were around back in the day where actual music, you got together in a studio, and pretty much across the board, they say, hey, we prefer that. It's more definitely. Chemistry. There's more organic stuff that can, I hear a line the bass player does, and it tells, wow, now I could do something else. What are your thoughts on it?
Well, that's, of course, here in Nashville, we still do that a lot, a lot of, live tracking sessions, but not nearly as many as there used to be. And for me, there's not as many either. But, I prefer that. But when I started working, first put my home studio together, gosh, even in my first home studio was Elise's ADAT machines, so people were passing around ADAT tapes back then. But anyway, Yeah, I've always approached it like I'm just doing an overdub like I'm sitting at a tracking session and I'm doing an overdub and the rest of the guys are in the lounge drinking coffee or something and so I try not to think of it as anything that's really different. It's just like I'm sitting, like so many times you'll be in a booth and you can't actually see everybody. You might be able to see a few people or something. So I just sort of think of it like that. Like here I am sitting in this guitar booth and playing on this song, and everyone else is playing, and so it doesn't really affect me that much. I don't feel like I'm alone.
Sure.
Doing this, So
I guess it's a blessing and a curse in a way, because on the one hand, you want to have that camaraderie. On the other hand, there's a lot of jobs I bet everybody gets that you wouldn't otherwise have without this ability.
Right. Yeah. And for whatever reason, I'm fortunate. I saw this coming pretty early. Even back in the '80s, late '80s and early '90s, when a lot of studios were adding those ADAT machines and people, the tapes and those things were like VHS cassettes. I don't know if you remember them or not, but
I do.
Yeah, and so people would, started passing those around. It was like, I had clients in Toronto and London and stuff, and they were like overnighting me these ADAT tapes to play on, and then I'd rush down to the FedEx and overnight it back to them, and it was. But I saw that coming pretty early on, and so I put together a little overdub room in my the room over my garage in my house, and so it's just been evolving ever since then, and now it's Pro Tools HD, and it's just. Like any studio, you're always, a few $1,000s away from everything you need.
Sure. Yeah.
Always.
I'm sure. Yeah. How about Paul Simon? I mean, that guy is just talk about an amazing songwriter.
Oh, that just kind of came out of nowhere. But once again, it was knowing people. When I first came to Nashville, one of my things I really wanted to do was work with the guys. I was a huge fan of the guys from Memphis, not just the Stax guys, but also there was a studio there, American Studio, which is where there was a producer there, Chips Moman. He produced, the Dusty Springfield, Son of a Preacher Man. And,
great song.
Yeah, all that stuff. And the guitar player on there was Reggie Young, who's a huge influence on me and a hero. And the bass player, if you remember the bass part going out on that song, Son of a Preacher Man, where the bass goes wild, and there was a bass player named Tommy Cogbill who played on Respect and just all this amazing stuff. And those guys were heroes of mine. And when I came, they had moved to Nashville and kind of taken over, and so they were. It was a big goal of mine to meet those guys, which I did, and I became friends with Tommy especially, and he was. I guess I would say he's kind of a mentor to me, and really helped me a lot. Tommy passed away, unfortunately, a few years later. But there were two bass players in that rhythm section. The other was Mike Leach, Mike was also or is a brilliant arranger as well. He arranged all the strings and horns on those Elvis songs like Suspicious Minds.
Wow. And, there's a lot of stuff going on there.
Yeah, and played bass on a lot of that stuff as well. So anyway, I would do sessions with those guys sometimes when Reggie, of course, was just like the busiest guitar player in town in those days. So a lot of times when those guys would get a session, Mike would call me to be the guitar player because they couldn't get Reggie. So
hold on a second. That says a lot about you. You're getting called in because Reggie Young can't make it. I mean, that's awesome.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
That's a feather in your cap, man. That's a.
Yeah, and so that's how playing with Paul Simon came about. They were going to play. This was kind of the end of the Graceland period, and that band had kind of, I think a couple of guitar players had to go back to Africa or something, and that touring band was kind of dissolved, and Paul was going to continue to play a little bit. He was going to play at Farm Aid. This was in the early '90s, and so I got a call from Mike Leach one day, and he said, "Hey, can you come down to Texas and do some rehearsals and play with Paul Simon?" And I was like,
twist my arm.
Yeah, I said, Paul Simon. He said, yeah. He said, we've been playing with him some, and I think Reggie had a commitment for some huge record he was playing on or something. Anyway, he couldn't make the rehearsals and the Farm Aid gig and everything, so they asked me to do it. So I was like, well, oh yeah.
Wow.
So we went down a few days early and rehearsed with Paul, and it was one of those moments, that was like, wow, here we go. And I've of course got all the records, and that's
a hell of a catalog.
Yeah, and tried to learn as many of the songs as I could and be familiar and everything. So yeah, and I'd written a few charts ahead of time just to kind of try to be up to speed, and so yeah. But it was pretty amazing.
So you played on the studio stuff. Did you do any touring with him as well?
No, just we played that Farm Aid gig, and then he loved the band and ended up kind of bringing in a few of the guys to record, and none of the sessions were ever released, but yeah, he really loved that band, but he was kind of on the end of the Graceland thing, and so nothing ever really happened with that. But
what did you learn most from like him in particular, or his habits, or?
Well, it's from Paul, and this seems to kind of go across the board, just the incredible focus that these artists at that level have. It's just the ability to completely focus, and outside things going on don't seem to have any effect on what they're working on at the moment. It's just the focus on the songs and everything. And every artist is different. Sometimes that focus will make some people will perceive that as, oh, this guy's kind of a jerk, because he's, he doesn't seem like he's, he's not a nice guy or something. But that's not really true. It's just that they're just so focused on the work and everything that sometimes it might seem like their personality is a little abrupt or something, but once you realize, and that's something I learned if you're going to hang at that level, you kind of have to be willing to realize that this is really important, and these people are taking this very, very seriously, and it's there's a time for laughing and joking, and there's a time for serious work, and you have to be able to read these situations. It's just kind of part of working at that level is being able to read these situations and seeing, okay, well, this guy or this woman is, they're here to work. They're not here to clown around at the moment. Yeah. This is about making this music as great as we can, and getting inside of these songs and creating something great. And it's it's always work. It's hard work, but sometimes you laugh along the way, and sometimes you don't. It's just,
sure.
Just learning how to read those situations is a big part of it.
I have this saying that I always said you can't be casually successful. Well, no matter what you're doing, if you're going to be successful in any game, that's a lot of intensity, a lot of deliberate maneuvers.
Yeah.
You can't sort of like, sure, you hear the guy, 1 in 100 million, he lucked into it. That's not, but the other, 999 success stories, they didn't just luck into it. It's intensity and deliberate moves and things. And so I totally get that. What's your favorite Simon and Garfunkel song?
Oh, boy. Oh, man. Well, I think I posted that version of The Boxer.
Oh, great song.
The other day.
What a great song.
Yeah, that would be one. I love the acoustic guitar part on that. It's just the finger picking on that.
It's like hypnotic, man. Yeah,
and and I don't think that's Paul Simon playing that part on the record. I think it's I'll think of the guy. He was a big session player in Nashville and New York. Oh man, I'll think of it. Fred Carter Jr. Yeah, I think that's Fred Carter playing on that record. So
beautiful
yeah.
It's funny. I grew up in New York City, and so I've grown up with those Simon and Garfunkel my whole life.
Yeah.
And that's I'm old school. I don't stream music. I don't know what you do. I have like 40,000 songs, and I mean literally in iTunes. But
yeah.
Simon and Garfunkel gets a cut once a year at a minimum. I'm always going through. It's like a nostalgia, but I feel good listening to their stuff.
Yeah. I love it too, and the sound of those records. There, every recording center back in those days, had its sound. L.A. and Nashville and New York, and I just love the sound of the New York stuff. A lot of it, it just sounds good to me for some reason. And which I was getting to work with Felix Cavallari was really something, because I was a huge Rascals fan when I was a kid and loved the sound of those records. There's just something about the sound of the echo and everything on those records that was different from L.A. and Nashville.
Well, let's talk about that. Felix, another tremendous musician. Wasn't he in? What else was he in after the Young Rascals? He was in something else where he was a singer and not. Was he in Mountain? Didn't he play with Leslie West?
No, he wasn't. But he and Leslie West had a band.
Okay.
And I think, gosh, they were talking about it backstage at a show one time. I think the band was called the Vagrants or something like that.
Yes, that was Leslie's first band. Right.
Yeah.
I knew he did something with Leslie because I'm a big Leslie West fan. And I knew I used to see, because I've heard Leslie talk about Felix in interviews, and I knew they had something together. I just couldn't think of it off the top of my head. Yeah.
So man, that Mountain stuff is amazing too.
When my older son was born, he's 27 now. I made remember cassette tapes. I made a cassette tape to take into the delivery room when he was born, and when he was born, Theme for an Imaginary Western, which is a great song. That was the song playing. So now I have that, that's like, I always loved that song. So now it's even more special because I always think of my son when that song comes on. But how did you hook up with Felix, and what was the big takeaway from working with him?
Oh, well, I've been playing off and on. I mean, in fact, I'm playing with him this weekend. We're going up to play some dates in the Northeast in New Jersey and New York.
Cool.
I've been playing with him off and on since one of the first gigs I did with him was New Year's Eve 2000. We played a gig at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
That's cool.
Yeah. It was. He's lived in Nashville since the late 80s, and he came here to kind of participate in the songwriting community. And a friend of mine that I was doing a lot of sessions with. Mark Prentice, who I think you interviewed. Mark's son Johnny.
Yeah, and I'm interviewing Mark. He's scheduled for like November or something.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, he's played with Felix too. Right.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so we were doing a ton of sessions together back then, and one day on a session he said, "Hey, I just went out and I'm going to start playing with Felix Cavallari." He said, "I'm so excited." I said, "Man," that makes you a rock star in my eyes. I hope you know. And sure. I said, if he ever needs a guitar player, mention my name. I think George Marinelli was playing with Felix at the time, and so I mean, it wasn't probably a month after that. George was going to go back and play with Bonnie Raitt or Jackson Browne or somebody. Anyway, George was going to leave Felix's band, and so Mark said, "Hey, you want to come play?" And I'm like, "Oh, yeah, absolutely. You're kidding."
There you go. Make your wish. Just put it out there. Sometimes it works.
Yeah. So just they gave me a cassette of the show, and so I just kind of brushed up, and I didn't really. I mean, I could play the songs. I didn't really have to work, and so Felix called and said, "Hey, yeah, you want to have a rehearsal?" And I'm like, "Well, I don't really need to." I said, "I could just jump in." He said, and then this first show was just like a kind of a short thing, about 30 minutes or so. And he said, "Yeah." So I just went up, and our sound check was the rehearsal. So we just ran through the songs, and everything worked. And I've been doing it, playing with him off and on ever since.
Since 2000.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a long time. So that's great.
Yeah. And Felix, he doesn't, he's kind of a homebody. He doesn't like to properly tour all that much. He has, but he would rather go out and do some one-offs, like book a week of shows and go out and play a few nights, and then not play for a while, and then go back out and do it again and everything. So which
is great for you, I'm sure.
Yeah, it was fantastic for me because it didn't. In those years, I was doing a lot of sessions, so it didn't interfere with that, and I got to go out and play with a rock hero and jam, and
that's awesome,
and have a great time, and come back home, and so.
When you sorry, go ahead. I apologize.
No, I was just going to say it came along at a great time because I was working, a couple sessions at least pretty much every day, and so at that time, and then to go out on the weekends and rock with Felix, I think it made me a better studio musician to have that come back into my life, to go out and rock and jam like that, and I think it kind of helped me be better.
I interviewed both Jerry McPherson and Jeff King, and Jerry said when he toured with Vince Gill, having to learn all them Dan Huff parts, he said,
yeah,
same thing. He said, when I came back in the studio, man, it was like I had 3 or 4 arrows in the quiver, and when I came back, I had like dozens of them.
Yeah,
and it made me such. And Jeff said the same thing when he was touring, I think, with Patty Loveless, because I forgot who played the record. It was either Dan Huff. It was somebody that it was. He had to work his chops, and when he came back, and that was a big tour that he did. He said the same thing. It made him a really good studio player.
Yeah.
So I've heard that pretty consistently.
Yeah. So I've always kind of tried to do that. I mean. A lot of guys in Nashville, just did sessions, and that's great, But I just always thought, I just wanted to keep that part of me, that part.
Well, that's why you started playing music in the first place.
Exactly.
To have that feeling, that camaraderie, that that putting it out there, and when you're in the studio, you're putting it out there, but you're not getting the feedback of what happens when you're putting it out there.
Yeah.
So to have that audience thing, that connection, and that a lot of guys I've spoken to said one of the things that really gives them the warm and fuzzies is when they're on stage and they're watching other people sing the lyrics, and they said it feels so good to be doing that to somebody, to be making that connection. So I could totally, really cool. Steve Winwood, another legend. How'd you get that thing, and what'd you get from that?
Oh, once again, that just that focus, and that came about, same kind of thing. He was, he lived in Nashville for a few years, and was putting his touring bands together with, using musicians from here and everything. And he was between tours and between bands, and there was an industry thing here I think it was called Tin Pan South, where songwriters, they have big songwriter shows and everything. And there was one, there's always one big show, and he was going to do that one. And so my friend Dave Pomeroy, great studio bass player, was putting the band together for Steve. So he called me and asked me to play guitar, and of course I said yes. And we had several rehearsals and did the show, and it was fantastic. And he ended up keeping a few elements of that band together. He was just trying all this experimental stuff at the time, experimenting with some Brazilian music, and so we had other rehearsals and stuff. But it was just one of those things that, once again, sometimes you hope these things will continue, but it didn't. But I was really thankful, for the time I did get to play with Steve. And I just, same thing, it's just, he's a fantastic guy, and just a musician's a musician, and just focused on it, just totally zoned in on his work, when he was working.
It's funny. I saw him. He was a double headliner. It was him and Santana in that show, and they came out and played at the end. He's actually a pretty good guitar player, and I was surprised because keyboards, I know, but he's a pretty good guitar player, man. He's not.
Yeah, and he's he plays. He's pretty well versed in a lot of styles. He's a great acoustic player and finger picker, and and then he straps on an electric and cranks it up and wails. Pretty cool.
It's hard to believe when he was working with Clapton, he was like 17, I think, or 16 or 17. That's like unheard of. That's like a prodigy.
Yeah.
Where are you originally from?
South Carolina, Camden, small town. I think now it's about 6,000 or 7,000 people. At its peak, it was 8,000 or 9,000 people.
Oh, that is a small. I had more people in my building. I'm not kidding. That's interesting. So, what was your childhood like growing up in Camden?
Oh my goodness, it was just amazing. It was just it was. Growing up, coming of age in the 60s, and it was just, I guess looking back, it was kind of idyllic. I, walked to school every day during school, and then in the summers, it was just, you get up and have breakfast and then disappear, leave the house and out with friends and swimming and just, I just remember these fantastic summers. But then, after I started playing guitar at 8 years old.
Oh wow!
And of course, then by the time I was 11 or 12, we'd put our first band together, which I keep this picture here in my studio. It's
that's awesome, man.
The Esquires. We started when we were like in the sixth grade.
Let me see that again. That's really cool. What kind of? Are you playing a Strat there?
Yeah, that's a '62 Strat.
Do you still have that?
No, I don't. Unfortunately, my father bought that for me when I was 10 years old. It was new, and it was stolen from me in the early '80s. It was back in the days when things that went through Kennedy Airport all disappeared.
Yeah, that's too bad.
It disappeared back then, and never to return. But that was pretty amazing to be 11 years old and have a Strat like that. And,
yeah, cool dad. What did your dad? Was your dad involved in music? What did he do?
No, he wasn't a musician. He loved music, but he brought a guitar home one day. It was some kind of harmony acoustic or something like that. That I'm not exactly sure how somebody gave it to him or something, and I think it had 4 or 5 strings on it, and so my brother and I were just like, instantly just, give me that, So we just started goofing around with it and figured out, you can make some sound, and So we were plunking out. It wasn't in tune or anything, but we were able still. We were plunking out little melodies to songs and stuff. And so my parents heard us doing that, and so they took us to this old guy who was a guitar teacher, and he started teaching us. And so for both of us, pretty soon, I mean, we just kind of took to it and just started playing. And then I, not too long after that, got my first electric guitar, which was a Fender Duosonic, which I loved.
Very cool. You still have that one?
I don't, but I just actually just got another one. I don't have the original, but Fender started making
let's do
Duosonics again.
That's interesting. So it's like a shrunken Strat with 2 pickups.
Yeah. It's the same small short scale like a Mustang, but it just had 2 pickups. Yeah, just really pretty basic guitar. The one I had the gold anodized pick guard.
When you first picked that up and played it, did it take you back?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
That's cool, man.
Yeah, and so I love the feel of it, and I love playing it. The pickups were a little weak on it, so I called Lindy Fralin, and he said, "Yeah, I make a Duosonic pickup." So he sent me a couple of slightly overwound pickups I had put in there, and it's just pretty cool little guitar. I actually play it quite a bit.
That's awesome, man. I must say, Mike's brother Pat, that we was talking about, is his twin brother. He's a steel player, professional steel player, steel guitar player in town now too. So the two of these guys play together, which that must have been really comforting, having somebody, not just somebody your age, someone your exact age, and your brother going on this journey with you. I would imagine that gave you guys a little more courage, in a sense.
I think so, and there was always somebody to play with. It was great for me. It made me when he was playing steel, we would learn songs like Sleepwalk, the San Juan Johnny hit, and so I was playing rhythm and he was playing the lead on the steel, and it made me a good rhythm guitar player, I think, which it is, just in my opinion, is like one of the most important things, to be a great rhythm player. So that was great, and then we'd learn a Ventures song or a Duane Eddy song like Rebel Rouser, and take turns playing the lead and the rhythm. And people have asked me, they say, it must be great being a twin. Did you guys ever fight, growing up? And I said, well, the only thing we ever really fought over was the reverb channel on the amp. we had a Fender amp, a Vibroverb, which actually we still have.
That's awesome.
And
do you use that in the studio at all?
Well, it's kind of living over at Pat's house right now. It's it's the Fender amp with a single 15-inch speaker, and it sounds really great with steel. So he kind of plays that. And but yeah, it's like, oh, you had the reverb channel yesterday. It's my turn. So.
Hey man, that's pretty good if that's all you thought about. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So where did it go from there? So you and Pat are playing together. You have your first band when you're 11. What came after that? What was the progression?
We just continued to, always play. We always had bands. We kind of branched off. We started playing in different bands. When I was 14, I got offered a job with this local band that was like, they were the older guys. They were in their late 20s, which I thought they were ancient.
Yeah, of course.
And I was.
You ever notice as you get older, now the bar is like, the bar moves up as you get older. Yeah. Now it's like, like probably 80s, a little old. But
I'm working with all these people in their 70s now, and they seem young to me. So
sure.
But these guys, and they had a really successful actual working band, which was common back in those days.
And you were invited to be in this band when you were 14.
Yeah. Their guitar player was drafted, and
oh wow.
So they said, yeah, I mean, I was good enough to hang with them, so they asked me to join, but they were doing things like, they were traveling and going to kind of work in the Carolinas, North and South Carolina, Georgia, and playing, a lot of, frat gigs and they were a working kind of R&B band, and so they would load up the van and leave town on a Thursday or something, or and go and play colleges and stuff. We might go to Athens and play University of Georgia on Friday night, and then be back at Carolina on Saturday. Maybe go play a gig up in North Carolina somewhere the next night. Or it was pretty cool. It was great. These guys were really working, and so I did that, and Pat joined different bands.
So your parents were okay with you doing that traveling on the weekend?
Yeah.
That is really awesome. Yeah. They must have really trusted you and had good faith that you'd make your judgment, which at 14, I mean, who the hell has good judgment? But
yeah. I think
really great.
The guys in the band came to my house and talked to my parents, and said, yeah, well, we'll keep an eye on Mike and keep him out of trouble, which was mostly true. But it was a great experience, and
so wait, I got to ask. So you're in college towns with guys that are in their 20s. That had to be the first time you smoked weed, especially during that time period. Well,
those guys were, they were kind of actually straight ahead guys. They were
wow.
I think one of them, was kind of a drinker, and which was good for me because I saw pretty early on the results of that.
That is good.
The weed smoking actually came along a little later for me. Like those guys were kind of, they were kind of serious about their gig. So.
Well, it's good that they honored their, whatever they told your folks too. That was pretty honorable.
Yeah.
That they kept their word and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That's okay. So now you're out with these guys. Where did it go from there?
Well, there was an R&B singer. His name was Clifford Curry, and he had a huge regional hit in the Southeast called "She Shot a Hole in My Soul." I think it was on Smash Records or something. And he had a couple
good
of
title.
Yeah, it was a really big record, and he always worked. I think he was based out of Memphis at the time, and he would come into the Southeast, and when he came into the Carolinas or Georgia or anything, he would always use our band. And so I ended up, even after I left that band, I still ended up playing gigs with Clifford, and which was great. He was just a fantastic old school showman, Chitlin Circuit guy and everything. And we'd go and play a gig up in Charlotte, North Carolina at a club up there. And then after that gig, we'd go to an after hours club, and play till 4 o'clock in the morning or something like that. It was
that's
just
cool.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. And, it was, but he was besides doing all the R&B stuff, we'd do like 20-minute versions of Down by the River, the Neil Young song and stuff.
A great song to do 20-minute version of too.
Yeah, just
so you were doing some serious woodshedding at a young age. I mean, you're playing 5-6 hours a night on the weekends, is what it sounds like.
And my senior year of high school, I was gone. Like, I think there was a limit of how many days you could be absent and still graduate, and I was right up at the limit, maybe a few days over, and I had this one class that I hadn't been to very much, and it was an English composition class, and this the teacher said, if you'll write a journal about what you did, traveling and playing music, she said, I'll pass you. And so I,
that's cool. Really cool.
I did that. I was just, so, yeah. So,
so you graduate high school?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Then,
and went to the University of South Carolina, and wasn't quite sure, what to do there. I thought I wanted to be a music major, but at that time, the only paths you could follow were, you could come out and be a band director or a music teacher. This was the days before, there were no performance degrees or anything like that back then. So after my freshman year, I changed my major to history and went that direction. And after my sophomore year, this was in the days when you went to college to get a deferment,
so you have to go to the draft. Yeah, sure, I remember that.
But that all, I was kind of at the age where things, all that was winding down and everything, and so
this is early '70s now. Yeah,
and they started the lottery system, and I got a 1A draft card, and I remember taking that to my father and saying, "Oh man, what am I going to do?" And he said, well, he's, he was a World War II veteran, and he said, "I'll tell you what you'll do. You'll go." And I'm like, "That's not what I want to hear, Dad."
What did your dad do? What kind of work did he do?
He was in construction. He worked for DuPont. Had their own construction company back then, and they built their factories. They built their factories and stuff. And so that's what he did. When they would start a project, he was the guy that looked at the plans and said, "Okay, we need this many hammers and this many bulldozers," and just figured out how many of each,
like project management
tool.
kind of.
Yeah, and so he would kind of oversee all that through the process of building stuff. So he traveled some. He was gone sometimes doing that.
So you said you said you're gonna go, and then what happened?
Oh well, then the lottery system came into effect, and I got a really high lottery number. So I got another draft card that's I think was a 1H or something like that, which essentially said, "Don't leave the country, but we're not going to call you," or something. So so as soon as I got that, and the pressure was off to stay in college, I dropped out and went into just focused completely on being a guitar player. And I knew I had read. I was working part-time in a guitar shop there in Columbia, and I had read a guitar player magazine that had an interview with Tommy Tedesco and some studio guitar players. And, I knew what that was, but that reading that interview really kind of put that into focus for me. Like, oh, okay, this is a job. This is something, that you can do. And so I just started reading everything I could find on that, learning about, guys in Nashville, guys in New York, and guys in Los Angeles, and just learning everything, Muscle Shoals and all that, and figuring out what that was. I remember being a little kid and watching television, hearing, Gunsmoke or something like that, and hearing a guitar in the soundtrack, and I remember thinking, I wonder who did that. Just and then learning, oh, okay, it was these guys sitting in a recording studio, and this is their job, and so that just appealed to me. I just thought, that's what I want to do, and not knowing what that was involved in that or anything. So
you had like a lot of wonderment and curiosity about this, and maybe reading that article sort of unlocked some of the.
It did.
The wizard behind the curtain, sort of.
Exactly, and of course now everybody's got all this information, and you can record at home, and young guys when they come to Nashville or wherever now, they come here and they already know what to do. They've been recording, they're experienced, and they walk right into a session already kind of seasoned, But back then it was like everything was so mysterious, and you had to, really dig for this information, and which is great.
What's funny, because when you were talking about how you got contacted by those older guys when you were 14 and you did these gigs, I was sitting there thinking, all this shit went on with no cell phone. How did that even happen? You got to make sure you're home. Then, then when you get there, your mom's going to want you to call. And then make sure you're, I mean, like, I'm thinking, wow, that's almost seems like a job just to get, back in the day. And that was, you mentioned FedEx. I'm thinking that was back when, even in the 80s when you were doing the FedEx, when FedEx came and knocked on your door, it's like, wow, FedEx is here. It's like when you got a long distance call, someone's calling long distance. Wow.
Things were important and mysterious. And,
it was like a big deal. FedEx is like, you felt like, oh, I'm dealing with things rich people deal with now. It was very, it was different, man, different perspective. So, so you start reading and studying about becoming a studio musician. Is it at that point you moved to Nashville?
Not too long after that. My brother and I, just talked about it a lot, and so we just decided to make the move together.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's really good. You guys must be extremely close. You've been through thick and thin together your whole, professionally, not only as brothers, but careers, parallel careers.
Yeah.
That's great. That's so good.
We came up here and, just really fortunate. Started getting, some road work with some country singers, and that led to, just through meeting people, that led to some bigger stuff. And my first big touring thing was with that country singer Eddie Rabbitt that I mentioned, who was he was kind of at the peak of everything at that time, and it was crazy. He had a record out called "I Love a Rainy Night."
I love the rainy night. That was pop. That crossed mainstream.
Oh yeah.
That was a big time record.
Yeah, it was number one on pop charts and country charts. And,
he's still around?
No, he passed away a few years ago.
Did he really?
Unfortunately, from cancer. But he was.
That's too.
He was a great man, and one of the first dates I did with him, he was headlining shows by then, of course, and we're going to do a show in Jacksonville, Florida, and our bus pulled up to this hotel, which was sitting kind of on top of this hill, and there was it was grassy and a lawn. And I just remember the bus turning up, and this entire hill was covered with girls and people and stuff. And,
wow, that must have made you miserable.
Oh yeah, it was terrible. But we had to have security get us to our hotel rooms. It was this was the first time I'd experienced anything like that. It was just.
Was it like surreal or just like,
yeah,
hey,
it was.
This is what I see on TV? Yeah.
Yeah. So, and Eddie he toured. Country singers kind of just play all the time. They're always playing. But he toured more like a rock artist. He would block out these 3 and 4 month tours where he would just get on the bus and he'd be gone. And then he would quit, for a while and write and record another album. So I did that tour with him, and which I think lasted a little over 3 months, almost 4 months. And while I was doing that, another opportunity, the chance to work with Dolly Parton came about. She was putting together a new band, and someone recommended me for that. And her music director actually came to an Eddie Rabbitt show to see me play. And
very cool, man.
Yeah, and so
you're getting scouted.
Yeah. So he got in touch with me and asked me if I'd want the job, and I was just like, well, yeah, sure. So I kind of did, what I've always done. I went and bought every Dolly Parton, at that time LP that I could lay my hands on. This was 1979, 80. And, here comes New Year's Eve again. My first gig with her was New Year's Eve, 1980. So
where was that?
Miami Beach. So, so I laid my hands on every record I could, and just, for, I think 10 days, I just learned every song I could, so I thought any song that they that they call, I'm going to be able to play it.
Yeah, sure. So, but that preparation, that work ethic, man, that's what makes the difference. That's why you are, that's why you've had the career you had, because a lot of guys either are too lazy or just intellectually not smart enough, or I don't know what, but that's why you're where you're at now. That's why you've played with all these people. It's the work ethic and it's the preparation and it's consideration too. I mean, to me, it's like if you're walking in a studio, it should be expected that you've done that. But actually doing it takes a lot of work.
Well, yeah, it does, and it's not that I'm not, basically, I mean, a lot of us are guitar players because we don't want to work. But it takes. But that, I just never wanted to squander an opportunity like that because they're pretty rare, and to be on somebody's radar like that is quite an honor, and I don't know, I just never wanted to squander that. I'm starting that process with Jewel now. I'm just. I've already started, and I'm going to just, dig way past, the songs that we're going to be doing. I want to know everything,
right.
when I walk in there. So, I'll do that, between now and November.
But there's a beautiful simplicity in that. Here you've been doing this 50 years, and it's not. What's the expression they say? It's not difficult. It's a simple process, right? You just you get the catalog, you learn the songs, you understand what's going through the performer's mind and what they like, what they don't like. It's not difficult, but it's hard to do for so many people. Yeah,
it and I've seen guys walk into auditions and they haven't listened to the music or they're not ready or I don't know, it just doesn't make sense to me, but it happens.
It's like going on a job interview and you don't even know what the company does.
Yeah.
I mean, it's no different than that. I mean, it's
exactly.
It's preparation. That's awesome, man. Let me ask you this, Mike. Everybody pays tuition in their career, whatever they do. Mm-hmm. And I was wondering if you'd be kind enough to share maybe one or two mistakes you've made along your journey and what were the lessons that you learned from those mistakes?
Oh, boy. Well, I think, I wish, well, like I said, when I knew I wanted to be a studio musician, guitar player, and I'm not really understanding what all that meant and everything, but I wish that I had worked harder to become a better reader. I did become actually okay at it. I'm not, there are guys that just, they just, before if the session has some, kind of intense reading, they never even look at the music. They're up walking around getting coffee and stuff, whereas I'm poring over it, marking all the repeats and codas so I don't get lost and, and just figuring out looking for hard passages and everything. So I'm not really a sight reader, I'm okay. I get through. I wish I had worked harder on that. That's kind of a regret. I would, these days, I would advise anybody just to, I kind of regret not staying in school and not graduating and.
Why is that?
I don't know. I just feel like maybe. Of course, I took this, been on this incredible path all these years, but I don't know. I just a lot of the guys I work with, have music degrees, and I've learned, I think in my knowledge of music theory and everything that I've sort of learned by the seat of my pants, I'm probably every bit as well versed as they are, just from having to work like I've had to work. But I don't know. There's just a kind of a grounding there. I think some things would have been easier for me if I had done that. I wouldn't have had to sweat quite so much over a few things like that. But but you always figure out I bought a book when I first got off the road with Dolly. I started doing a lot of jingles. There was a big jingle business in Nashville at that time, and a lot of that stuff was, Nashville is kind of known for the number charts, which is
the Nashville number charts.
Which is really the way 90% of everything works here. But also in the jingle world at that time, which is all different now. But that was a big business back in those days, and all the jingle sessions were all written out. Everything was written, and sometimes you'd walk in, there'd be 30 pieces on the floor, and you'd have, there'd be like a guitar 1 and 2 book, and or sometimes 3 guitars, and you'd have your parts, and so one of my things has always been just saying yes, so people,
sure.
I get hired for these sessions, so I'd go, I always did a good job, but I really had to work hard at it, and I had some nail-biting moments there, which, I think if I would have worked harder in school and been better at it, it would have saved that for me. So that's,
sure,
the main one. But, you figure out ways. A funny story, when I was with Dolly, we were rehearsing for this. She was rehearsing this big Vegas show, which she ended up not using a lot of it anyway. But she was hiring different arrangers to write things, and this was like going to be a big production with strings and a huge orchestra. And so she had different arrangers writing stuff, and we were rehearsing in Los Angeles. And one of the arrangers she hired was Mike Post. And so he, the music came ahead of time, and we showed up for rehearsal at SIR that day. And so I immediately went over and started looking at the guitar parts, and everything was pretty straight ahead, mostly master rhythm charts, which, I can read rhythm, that's easy. But there was this one line. It was, I don't know, probably 8 bars of just really, it looked really hard, and right above it said guitar and synth. And so I thought, oh man! So I walked over to the keyboard guy, this guy named Red Young, who's just an amazing musician. I said, hey Red, how are you going to phrase this? Play this for me. And he said, it's just this, and he played it, and I said. And of course, as I learned, as is the case, most of the time when you see things, they look really hard, but they're really not. It's just sort of, and he played it, and it's like, oh, okay, I know what that is,
So it's okay.
I went back over and put it on the stand, and Mike came in, and counted everybody off, and of course, and then when it got to that section, this was like a kind of a long 4-page overture kind of piece of music. It had Copeland references in it and all this stuff, and so it got to that place, and this was around the time of the Rockford Files and all these things. Larry Carlton was playing on his stuff, and so I knew exactly what sound to get. I said, okay, I know exactly what to do when it gets here. So it got to that place, and I just cranked it up and wailed across those 8 bars, and played those licks with Red. And so after the session, after the rehearsal, he came and said, hey, you really did a good job on that, man. He said, most guys don't read that like that, And I said, oh, well, I said, yeah, it was cool. It was, it was cool. I said, it was a cool part, I said, yeah, thanks. And so he said, I'll if you want, I'll introduce you to some contractors and take you around. And, so I had a little place that Dolly was, paying for in LA at that time. And so, he introduced me to, this contractor, Frank DeCaro, and some other guys got me on some work out there. I did a Golden Globes pre-record and just stuff like that, a few things. But I was Peggy and I we were going to get married, so I briefly flirted with the idea of staying in Los Angeles, but I ended up coming back to Nashville. But that's just a long story to go around. But I wish I had worked harder at that, early on, so I didn't have to sweat it quite so much when I started getting the work.
Jeff King said the same thing. That was one of his things, that if he, he would have liked to be a better, and he had a similar situation, not a jingle, but something similar happened like that. So, but when I think as an outsider, whenever you're self-employed, you're always going to have moments where you're, like, as you said, on thin ice with something.
Yeah.
I think that's just you can never anticipate everything.
Yeah, exactly.
The nature of being self-employed is you got to make decisions, and sometimes they're good, sometimes they're dicey, and you just figure out and get resourceful and get through it.
Yeah. And in Nashville, it's it's kind of unique. It's like, especially among guitar players, we're all friends, and we would all do anything for each other. And I listened to Jerry McPherson's interview, and he was talking about the flood and losing, and I remember when that happened, my equipment was stored at another cartage company, which was also close to a creek that floods all the time. And so I just assumed that my stuff was flooded as well. But as it turns out, the water didn't reach the place where my gear was. So,
so you had no damage? You lucked out?
No, I didn't. No.
Thank goodness.
My stuff was at a place called Session Services, which was the other. There were two big cartage companies at the time, and two or three. Anyway, so it's just like all of us just immediately started calling each other and saying, "What do you need?" I've got a couple of extra strats. I've got extra amps, and I can put together a pedal board for you real quick. It was just, we all, and a couple guys, I took guitars and stuff, but it was like that. Just everybody's calling each other, and saying, and people were calling me saying, "Did you lose anything? Do you need anything?" It's
that's really cool. Everybody, it's a very nice community in Nashville. Everybody is very supportive, and that's I've mentioned that to my wife several times. I've never seen anything like that.
Yeah.
Two more questions. Man, I'm going to have to bring you back for another interview sometime because there's so many things I didn't get to. But let's talk about the flip side of that question, as opposed to some tuition you paid. But are there one or two things that you did, in hindsight being 2020, at the time you did them, they might have been out of your comfort zone, but they turned out to be really good moves?
I think I've always, when you get comfortable in something, it's hard to leave. It was hard to leave Dolly Parton's band in the early '80s because it was such a great job, and she's just like the best, and it's hard to do that. I think making a commitment to get off the road for a while and just focus on sessions was hard, but it was the right thing to do, and things, maybe in some of the stuff I wish I hadn't done. I had a job there. There was a television network, a cable network here called the Nashville Network for a few years, and they did taped a lot of television shows, and that was, everything here is musicians union work, so the scale was great and everything. But I had jobs on a couple of staff bands and television shows, and I thought, wow, this is really taking up time away from my, other recordings and stuff. So I think I'll, leave this. So I quit a couple of those jobs, and those both of those things kind of went on to run for a few years, and the guys that did them made a lot of money. So I was like, maybe that wasn't the best decision. So, but it was it was fine. But you never can tell.
You can't connect the dots moving forward, unfortunately.
Yeah.
One last question: if you could go back and give advice to your younger self, what advice would you have given?
I think I would have started sooner. I think I waited
sooner than 11. Then
Well, no, I mean, moving to Nashville and
Right.
and starting a career here, I waited until I was in my early 20s, but looking back, I mean, I could have come sooner, and you know, I kind of wish I hadn't waited, but everything timed out the way it was supposed to. But yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, I wouldn't hesitate again. You know, it was a big decision to pack up and move here, and yeah, I think I would just not hesitate. You know, I'd start sooner.
you realize that's not congruent with I wish I finished college.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, yeah.
Just wanted to point that out.
Yeah.
Hey, listen, man, I would definitely like to have you back on the show. I know we talked that you're going to have a new album coming out in spring of next year.
Yes.
That'd be great. I'd love to hear it.
That's my goal.
Yeah, man, I'd love to hear it, and I'd love to talk about it on the show. And you're a wonderful guy, man. I really appreciate your time. It's been great getting to know you, and I definitely want to do this again.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, and I'll look forward. I want to anxious to hear Jeff's interview. He's a good friend.
Oh yeah, we had
cool.
that was a good interview. It was a really good interview. I have, you know, it seems like the interviews with the guys that are, I don't know if it's closer to my age or, you know, more experience in what you do. You know, is it the A-list guys? I don't know, but they're more. I think when you're older, you give a shit less, and you're more okay being you. And, I mean, it's the truth.
Yeah.
It's the truth. You know, it's like I'm going to tell my story, and it's if someone doesn't like it, it's okay. It's it's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So So anyway, man, listen. Thank you for everything. I really appreciate your time.
Sure
You're a wonderful guy. Anything you want to promote at all? Anything?
Oh well, I guess if this is going to. Air in November, is that right?
Yep. This will be in November.
I guess I'll be out with Jewel, so come see her.
Great. Come check out Jewel in the Christmas tour and come see Mike Sievers. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this interview as much as I did. Thanks again to Mike Sievers. I really appreciate your time. You're a genuine, swell guy. And go to everyonelovesguitar.com. Sign up to get notified about future episodes, along with some other cool new stuff we'll be doing for guitar players. Be nice. Go play your guitar and have some fun. Till next time, I'm out. Thanks for listening. Peace, y'all. We hope you enjoyed this show. If you did, subscribe to the Everyone Loves Guitar podcast, and you can do this online at everyonelovesguitar.com or on iTunes. And if you like the show, please leave us a 5-star positive review. The more 5-star reviews we get, the higher our show ranks, and higher rankings mean we get to continue speaking with cool, interesting guests on our show. We'll see you on the next episode, and until then, keep playing your guitar and have fun making music.